Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and the Pittsburgh Penguins, despite losing the last game that they played in, it seems like they're back to their winning ways, at least much more so than during the 7-game losing streak. The Penguins finished their 3-game road trip with back-to-back games over the weekend, a 4-2 win against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then a 5-2 or 5-4, overtime loss to the Montreal Canadiens. Horwat, when I watched that Canadiens game back, it just seemed like the typical team on a second half of a back-to-back runs out of gas in the third period. Not to say that they were awful in the third period. They certainly weren't perfect, but they certainly weren't the worst they've been this season. So scoring a couple goals, trying to take the lead 3 different times, but eventually losing and giving up all 3 leads. What did you think about the end of the game on Saturday night? And did you see it like I did, which is just an older team in the NHL ran out of gas and the younger team took advantage?
There's just too much going on. There's too much nonsense. It felt like every time I looked back at the screen, there was another penalty or there was another goal being scored. It felt like chaos, but organized chaos, not total. This game is on crack chaos. So it was weird. So it just needed a little more construction. It felt like kind of both teams were a bit off the rails, but it's about having having enough gas to finish it off. I mean, I think you're pretty much nail on the head there that it was an older team that just couldn't keep it together for another 60, then few extra minutes more. And I mean, certain parts of that team don't help right now, like an injury to your goaltender that we're going to talk about, your first line not doing anything that we're going to talk. Everything we're going to talk about today was summed up in that game. I feel like too. It was chaos, but organized chaos, and there's no other way of putting it. Like I said, every time I looked back, there was something new happening.
Yeah, age and lack of speed was not the only reason the Penguins lost that game on Saturday night. There were a multitude of factors that got into the overtime loss to the Canadiens, but it was the same guys for Montreal as in the first game. It was Kirby Dach, it was Cole Caulfield, and it was Nick Suzuki. Those 3 guys are the heartbeat of the Montreal Canadiens, and they reared their ugly head against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first matchup. They did it once again here in the second matchup. Mike Hoffman gets the overtime winner. But are you worried at all about the Pittsburgh Penguins' age at this point? We've seen in a couple games where younger teams, I think namely Seattle at times, you saw Matty Beniers get a couple of really good shifts just simply because of his speed and a couple of good opportunities because of his speed. Both games against Montreal, I thought it was evident. And even in Toronto, you see the guys that aren't really as fleet of foot that the Penguins were able to kind of stifle, and guys like Austin Matthews, guys like John Tavares. But the Penguins did struggle to keep coverage on guys like Mitch Marner and William Nylander. So at this point of the season, 15 games in, are you worried about the Penguins' age and their speed as a team?
No, not the age. I'm not worried about the age. The age is going to be perfectly fine. The speed, I think, isn't necessary for the Penguins. While it's going to be worrisome against certain teams, there are ways to get around it and to play a more strategic game than it is to play a speed game. And it's something that the Penguins have been needing to do for a long time now. It is stop focusing on your speed because clearly you just don't have it anymore, and there's nothing wrong with that. Crosby always says the game's getting faster around him. Okay, well, change the mindset of the team then. I mean, we've already done that this year too. We're already not focused on the speed game, which is good. We are playing more of a passing, back and forth game rather than trying to beat them out through speed. The only issue is we're also trying to outscore our issues. And when not everyone is clicking, you can't do that. And you're going to need other people to step up in the right way.
Yeah, when it comes to that entire conversation, the age doesn't bother me because some of the older players on this team are some of the better players. And that namely being Evgeny Malkin, who we'll talk about, and Sidney Crosby as well, even though his line has kind of struggled through that entire road trip. But age to me is a non-factor. Obviously, it plays a little bit of a role, but I don't think that that's a factor for winning and losing at this point with the team that you have when the older guys are supposedly the better guys. It's the team speed that kind of worries me a little bit. Because when guys like Nylander, guys like Marner, guys like, Caulfield, Suzuki, Doc, when they're able to just skate around your defense, that's when it becomes a little bit more worrisome. And I understand the Penguins, they wanted to get bigger. They wanted to be able to clear out the net front a little bit more, but they're not doing that. And if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to do what your purpose is, then the speed game is going to look that much worse against you because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And now these guys can freewheel around the net, and that's what turns into great opportunities. A lot of the goals the Penguins are giving up are coming from really close to that net front. So not being able to clear the net, not being able to get to net fast enough is an issue that I see going forward. But it's something that, Brian Rust is a very fast player. He hasn't quite played like it this year. Kasperi Kapanen is he's a fast player, but he just hasn't played well at all. Mm-hmm. And you can't sacrifice actual good play just to have somebody who's fleet of foot out there. I think Hollander's a little bit slower than Kapanen, but I would go back to Hollander on Tuesday night. That's just my personal opinion. So do I think that those are massive factors that will play into whether or not the Penguins make or miss the playoffs? No, but I do think there is an issue there that if you don't figure out at least a little bit, it's going to be a problem later into the season. And if you get into the postseason, it's going to be a problem when you try to get through a 7-game series with such high tempo as teams in the Eastern Conference, like the Rangers, like the Hurricanes. Even the Bruins play with a very fast tempo under Jim Montgomery now. So you're going to need to be able to get that tempo up a little bit more. And that's really how I feel about that. I just think that the Penguins are not playing a fast enough game. And realistically, when Sullivan came in, that was the game. Play fast, play smart. Well, they're not fast, and they've been struggling with the play smart thing at times this season as well.
We have to, like I said, we've been having to do this for a couple of years now. We have to stop trying to focus on a speed game. We just don't have it. Mm-hmm. It is now about playing smart, which you're right. Some players have been struggling with it this year, but at the same time, in the games where the team has looked really good, they've looked really smart and really good. Mm-hmm. There have been plenty of positives to pull from this season. And I think most of the negatives are just stemming from that 7-game losing streak. If we erase that, if we're able to, a month from now, be in a pretty good position, we absolutely look at that losing streak in a completely different light. Learn from all of those mistakes, learn from all of those games, and smarten up. You're right.
Now, one of the other issues the Penguins faced on Saturday was apparently an injured goaltender, which nobody was aware of. Tristan Jarry dropped the news himself after the game that he's been dealing with, quote, some physical issues and that he is not playing at 100%. We don't know what the injury is. We don't know how long he has been playing with this injury, but it kind of makes a little bit more sense as to why Casey DeSmith got the starts in both Washington and in Toronto last week.
It does, yeah, and it's kind of surprising that he has this injury. We don't even know what it is. No, there's been no details given, just physical issues, so we can't even really call it an injury. The thing about this injury is, I'm also not super surprised. Jarry's been playing a rough game this year. He's been run into a couple of times. Something could have popped up at any point. It could be, a rehashing from the lower body injury from last playoffs, from just getting run. He's been run into a couple times this season, so who knows if it's stemming from that, and who knows how long it'll take to fully heal, especially if he's still playing. Mm-hmm. This is interesting. It's quite a conundrum because can the Penguins do anything financially about it? I mean, can they say, hey, let's just rest you let's take you out of the lineup for a little bit, not LTIR you, but pop you on IR, pull up Tokarski if we need to. We don't have the financial means to do that right now. This is going for a ton of people. Don't get hurt. We can't. There's nothing we can do. I think the Leafs just had this problem not too long ago, except it was just with their goalies. If ours is just the financial cap hell that we're in, if certain players get hurt, there's nothing much we can do about it. Jarry's one of them, so we can't really, put him down because this whole physical issue is raising the question of, well, why do we keep playing him? We don't really have a choice. And, I mean, for what it's worth, man, would you rather have an injured Jarry or a healthy Tokarski and then some cap issues? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing with Tristan Jarry too. The Penguins don't go anywhere if Tristan Jarry's not on his game. Like if Tristan Jarry plays the way that he has in the past 5 games, it's not going to go well for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Like Casey DeSmith, for what it's worth, played very well in Washington and in Toronto. He's certainly turned his game around, back-to-back wins. That's a confidence boost for your backup goaltender. But that's what he is. Like at his best, he might be a slightly above average 1B in this league. That's Casey DeSmith's ceiling. But the Pittsburgh Penguins need their starter. And they need Tristan Jarry to play like their starter. He hasn't played like that, and now it makes a little bit more sense. He's dealing with that injury. If you look at what he did on Saturday night, 37 saves on 42 shots, one massive save that he made in the third where he made a huge leg save. I believe the Penguins were up by 1 at that point. Didn't end up mattering, but still, at the end of the day, could have resulted in the Penguins getting at least the pity point. 3 goals allowed in the third period, though, which has been a very big area of concern for Tristan Jarry. We talked to Jesse Marshall of The Athletic last week. He said, basically, to sum everything up that he said, and he did it at the end of his little spiel, was he's just not performing to the level we expect of him right now, plain and simple.
Yeah.
He's below the line. That's where his performance is at. Now, if it's because of the injury and he needs a little bit of time, I understand that you don't want to LTIR the guy and have him miss at least 10 games. That is a huge chunk of time to miss, and to be relying on Casey DeSmith to pick up the slack and relying on Dustin Tokarski to make a couple starts. But if this team's going to be successful, it's going to be because Tristan Jarry is healthy and playing well, like I mentioned. If that means that he has to go on LTIR a little bit and actually rest this injury instead of just playing through it, then that's what you do. But the other thing is, we don't know the extent of this injury. That's why this is a very difficult conversation, because we don't know if it's something that he needs more time off, or if it's just something that it's a weird thing that flares up at times, and at times it's not bad. We have no idea. So the fact that he's, quote, dealing with some physical issues is not a good thing for the Penguins.
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's the first and foremost. This is not a good thing to be having a discussion of. But for what it's worth, it isn't bad enough that he's forced out of the lineup already. There's something to hang our hat on, I guess, that he's still able to play. And I mean, yeah, he gave up 5 in Montreal, but I mean, there was like 40 some shots on him. So he's able to still make saves. Clearly it's not, the worst thing in the world, but it's still enough to cause concern, enough to really want to pay attention to what's going on to him for the next couple of games and see if he progresses, see if things get worse. Like I said, we don't know what it is. Does he also put a target on his back? Like I said, he's already been run a couple of times this year. Who do we have coming up? Toronto? Wussies. So at least he'll be fine there. But
Minnesota on Thursday?
Minnesota's going to be tough.
They're a big team.
Yeah, and also I just remembered who plays on the 4th line in Toronto. If they decide to bring Wayne Simmons back up, yikes. But that being said, I think putting that to the side, it is just a cause for concern. It's something we just need to monitor and keep an eye on overall, because we're out of options when it comes to filling in. Like I said, I don't know what's up with Teddy Blueger still. Like I said, like certain guys just cannot get hurt right now because of our financial issues and because of our roster size. Are we at the max now?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're at 20. They're at 23 out of the possible 23.
22, because they just sent Friedman down. Right.
That's correct. They did send Friedman down yesterday, which, I mean, that's bodes well for P.O. Joseph. That's all I know.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a great point.
But definitely something we're going to have to monitor with Tristan Jarry, hoping that he gets back to 100%, because the Pittsburgh Penguins, they need him there. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, the Penguins road trip was interesting in certain aspects. We'll talk Kasperi, Kapanen, the Evgeny Malkin line, and a slump for Sidney Crosby. All that and more after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, We're talking about the Penguins road trip. Overall, a pretty successful road trip. They finish it 2-0-1, get 5 out of a possible 6 points. And if that's what you're going to do every 3 games, then that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Decent performances from the Pittsburgh Penguins. There were some lows, there were some highs, and we'll continue to get into that right now. Kasperi Kapanen, we mentioned on Thursday's episode, and we didn't have the time to talk about it because he got the healthy scratch in Washington. Good thing we didn't, because more of that story has played out now through those back-to-back games in Canada. Kapanen is certainly in Mike Sullivan's doghouse. He also got the healthy scratch in Toronto, where he used to play. Hollander played instead in both of those instances. And then he drew back into the lineup on Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens on the Penguins' fourth line. Finished with a team low 7 minutes and 19 seconds of ice time, and did basically as close to nothing as you can while playing in a National Hockey League game. Horwat, what is next for Kasperi Kapanen?
That's the $1 million question, really. What do we do here? What do we do? I mean, in the offseason, in the offseason was a much easier answer. You let that man walk. And now here we are, 15 games into the season. He's getting paid $3.1 million to play 7 minutes a night, or sit in the press box, or not look good. This is an ugly, ugly situation that man, you don't want to start placing blame on things, but Hexy, what are you doing here? This was not a great decision. There's no other way around it. Kasperi Kapanen has not been good. He started off fine. Like, we thought maybe something could come from it in the first couple of games. Scored a goal in the first game, got an assist in the second, picked up 2 assists in that weird Columbus game. But that's been it. And then it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the rest of the games without a point. This isn't pretty. This isn't pretty. And he wasn't on the lineup for the 2 wins. So if you look at his game log, that's a bunch of L's in a row. A lot of minuses. This isn't good. This isn't good. This isn't, I don't know if it's issue number 1, but it's one that needs to get solved quickly.
Now, with Kapanen, the thing is, I want to see how he responds, because I wouldn't say Saturday was a chance to respond for him. He's still in the doghouse with Sullivan. You take those healthy scratches. The point is probably, when you do that, you got to get through to the player. We saw it happen with Poulin last year in Wilkes-Barre. It got through to him. He turned it around, and that's why his standing is so much better, 7, 8, 9 months later in the organization, because he took that healthy scratch and he handled it the appropriate way. Will Kasperi Kapanen do the same thing? We don't know. We don't have that answer yet, because you can say what you want about Saturday. Yeah, he got back in the lineup. He got back in the lineup on the 4th line and got 7 minutes of ice time. He had less ice time than Josh Archibald. I think there's still time for this to play out, in my opinion.
Only issue is, there is still time for it to play out. The only issue that I pull up with that is he was also healthy scratched last year for the same thing. This isn't a new thing, though. We're rehashing the same old issue that we just had with him last year. And sure, maybe he played a little better in the postseason and learned from it. Well, guess what? The issue is back. This shouldn't be an issue again, regardless of how much he performed last year. It's a new year, and slow starts be damned. Like I said, he had a pretty decent start to the season. I mean, I don't think we were all expecting him to have 5 points in 5 games, were we?
No.
So, and granted, like I said, that's been it. His last 7 have been awful, or 8 or 9, however many it's been. But still, this is not a new issue with him. So I would say, yeah, there's time to learn, but at the same time, no, there's not. This was an issue last season.
I hate to do this. I really do. And I hate when other people do this. So I hate the fact that I'm about to. But when you look at what Ron Hextall did in the offseason, spending the $3.2 million for multiple years for Kasperi Kapanen, you look at what he could have gotten for that money. And I understand. Listen, I hate this. I hate doing it. But it's really evident and clear in this instance of what you could have had instead of Kapanen. You could have had Evan Rodriguez. Now, it's not that Evan Rodriguez is lighting things up in Colorado, but he has 5 goals and 7 points in 13 games. He plays all 3 areas. You know, we've seen Evan Rodriguez be very good on the Penguins power play the last couple of seasons. Evan Rodriguez also can kill penalties, brings a scoring threat to the penalty kill, was part of that kill last year that went third in the National Hockey League. And he doesn't really, I mean, the problem is they're so similar.
Mm-hmm.
But Evan Rodriguez still has an upward trajectory right now, whereas Kapanen is so far. He's like the U.S. economy. He's so far in the shitter that it's impossible to see when that's going to turn around.
It's, first of all, Kapanen's getting paid more than Jeff Carter, and I'm just realizing this. Secondly, even if you didn't want to bring Rodriguez back because maybe he's not going to have that same season again, then let Kapanen walk for nothing. Then you have $3.2 million in space, and hey, this whole goalie situation might be able to get figured out a little easier. Hey, maybe Teddy Bluger's actually okay to play. Who still knows? There's a lot of things that could have been, organized, fit, and figured out just with $3.2 million of free space. Maybe Heinen makes an extra million out of that. Maybe you're working with 2.2. It's more than nothing. And, I don't have a good answer for this because what's everyone immediately going to jump to? Oh, trade him away. Okay, just like the Brian Dumoulin conundrum here, who's going to take him?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Attempt to try and trade Brian Dumoulin. Fine, sure. Attempt to try and trade away Kasperi Kapanen. Who is going to take them? And what are you getting back? Mm-hmm. I love the idea of take all of our bad players for all of your good players. Love that idea. It's not how it works, though.
No, it's not. And to close out this entire discussion with Kasperi Kapanen, because, the answer would be to trade him, but I just don't know who's going to take him on and what you're going to have to pay, because you're going to have to pay a premium to get him out of here. At full cost, you're going to have to pay a premium.
He'd be
easier probably have to give up a third-round pick.
Yeah, he'd be easier to trade away than Dumoulin at this point, but at least, I don't know. It'd at least be easier than Dumoulin, but it's still going to be difficult.
Yep. Kapanen, you mentioned 5 points in his first 5 games, 0 points since, and he is also not recorded more than 1 shot on goal in any game since the end of his first 5. So not a great run here for old 42 for the Pittsburgh Penguins, getting paid $3.2 million to sit in the press box and then play 7 minutes a game. We'll see if he gets in against Toronto on Tuesday and how much he gets utilized if he does. But let's talk about something positive here, because the Penguins have recorded 5 out of 6 possible points in their last 3 games. That's a good thing. Yeah. They're winning hockey games, or they're in hockey games and that they should win, as in Montreal game. But the one real positive to take out of everything is the Evgeny Malkin line. I mean, it has been absolutely ridiculous how good this line has been. And not only is it Evgeny Malkin, not really is it Rickard Raquel, but Jason Zucker is on a heater right now, which is not like, I love Jason Zucker. Uh-huh. I will back Jason Zucker as much as I possibly can. Obviously, we all asked the question, will he get traded last offseason? Right now, for all Hextall that we're getting on to for the Kapanen thing, holding on to Zucker seems like a good move for Ron Hextall, because he has a real good second line on his hands in Pittsburgh.
I think that offseason, I think that question that I just asked with Kapanen and Dumoulin probably applied to Zucker over the offseason of, yeah, you can try and trade him, but who's going to take him? Like, we saw what Zucker's last 2 seasons were, injury riddled, and I mean, they added up to, I keep looking at the stats. His last 2 seasons added up to 79 games. I think he had 30 points, if that. It wasn't good. It was not pretty. But now here he is, 13 games in with 13 points. Yeah, he already had an injury, but guess what? It was a quick one. He's back with 4 goals and 9 assists and just looking damn good. The analytics speak for themselves. I mean, and you could speak for them as well. He's just looked much better. He looked like that those first 9 games, 12 games, however many he played before the COVID shutdown. That's how good he looks right now. Mm-hmm. And he's playing with Malkin, who also looks like a house of fire. Damn. I mean, it's 2 players that, a lot of fans wouldn't have mind seeing leaving in the offseason. So they both have chips on their shoulders and a ton to prove. I mean, Malkin with a new contract that's paying him 6.1 for the next 4 years at the age of 36. Ugh. But right now, it looks to be paying off. Jason Zucker, in the final year of his contract, probably looking for one more at least decently priced one. Mm-hmm. He's earning the hell out of it. Both of these guys are earning their money and earning their dues and just proving everybody wrong and making themselves look really good doing it. And then there's Rickard Raquel, who is also just there and hasn't stopped shooting the damn puck. Is he leading the team still in shots? He is.
He is. Yeah, that line has been really good for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they were especially good on that 3-game road trip last week. I mean, combined in those 3 games, they scored 5 goals, 7 assists, and 12 total points in 3 games. Malkin had 2 goals, 2 assists. Zucker led the line with 2 goals and 3 assists, thanks to his 3 assist outing on Saturday. And Ricardo Raquel, not to be forgotten, had 1 goal and 2 assists. But when you ask about it, yeah, they're putting the puck in the back of the net, but the big thing is they're just dominating pace of play too. You
Hmm.
look at what they've done analytically, which you mentioned. I will speak to it. 5 goals for, 0 goals allowed at 5-on-5, 65% of the shot attempts, 71% of the expected goals, and a supremely nice amount of the scoring chances at 69%. It is a dominant performance by these three in games where it's not playing against bad teams. I mean, yes, the Capitals have struggled and they looked awful against the Tampa Bay Lightning last night, but the Penguins' second line dominated in Washington, dominated in Toronto, and dominated in Montreal. There was just no slowdown from these three guys, and you just absolutely love to see it.
Yeah, they're firing on all of the cylinders, and it's so impressive to see. Like I said, it's two guys that are playing with a chip on their shoulder, and a guy that everyone says shouldn't even be on that line, which you might still be right, and maybe he deserves to be back up on the first line to a discussion we'll have in a minute, I'm sure. It's just looking at those three right now. Malkin and Zucker are just feeding off each other so well, and then every time Raquel is just around, he's just ripping shots and doing what he can to produce himself. It seems like it is, like I said, Malkin and Zucker doing their thing, and Raquel just kind of being the Robin. But screw it, it still looks damn good.
Mhm. And here's the thing with Ricard Raquel too. He looks like he's being the Robin, but eventually he's just going to go off.
Yeah,
He's done that already earlier this season. And the question of whether Raquel should go on the first line or Rust should go on the first line, like we said, even though Rust has, not had the best couple of games, nobody on that first line really has. I mean, you can talk about Jake Gensel being on a goal streak that ended on Saturday night, but a couple of those were empty net goals.
yeah.
Um,
They ask how many.
that's exactly right. But looking at that line, right now you have 2 players at over a point per game. Or
Hmm.
sorry, at a point per game or over. Evgeny Malkin has, let me see here, 16 points in 15 games. And Jason Zucker, you mentioned, he looked great in his first stint with Pittsburgh before the COVID shutdown. That was 12 points in 15 games. He has 13 points in 13 games played right now. Only 4 goals, but he's starting to find the back of the net and he's starting to mesh with Evgeny Malkin, which is the one thing that everybody wanted to see. Can Malkin get a second line mate where he finally gets the chemistry? Because Zucker and Crosby, they just kept not putting that together. Zucker on the third line with Carter and Kapanen last year in the playoffs. Okay, it's all right. Or when Rodriguez was down there, all right, cool. Zucker's looking good there. But now with a healthy Jason Zucker, with chemistry and Evgeny Malkin, it's a really good thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins. What I think makes this line so effective right now, Evgeny Malkin is playing out of his mind. Jason Zucker is very heavy on the forecheck, and Ricard Raquel, if the puck gets on his stick, you're not getting it away from him. So you have a possession guy, you have an energizer bunny that's going to make it hard for other teams to get the puck out and going to make it hard for other teams really to have any breathing room. And you have an all-world player in Evgeny Malkin who is playing like it. Those three styles are meshing perfectly into what you're seeing right now in the last 3 games, and that is a terrific second line for the Penguins.
Tack on just 36 hits for Zucker as well. Third on
Yeah.
the team. That guy's going to do it all, whether he breaks his body in half or not. But right now he's in one piece and looking good. It's so impressive.
Mhm.
It's Do they deserve to be bumped to the first line? I don't know. Listen, those are strategic questions that we're not willing to ask, but
Here's the thing, too. Who cares what the
yeah.
lineup order is when the graphic comes out? That line led in 5-on-5 ice time for a reason
Well,
on
there you go.
Saturday.
Yeah.
You
There
know,
you go.
Sullivan's going to deploy who is playing best, and right now it's the second line. So even though on that graphic that gets tweeted out by the Penguins before the game, even though that is the second line, if they're playing like this, they're a first line on any other team.
It's good PR having Sidney Crosby at the top.
Oh,
It's good
correct. And
PR.
you're not going to have the appearance of demoting Sidney Crosby, but
Right.
Right now, comparing the two lines, maybe that's the reason that we see Evgeny Malkin's line get a little bit more time at 5-on-5, because Sidney Crosby's line is actually on a cold streak, which we hate to see it. And in those same games, we talked about the Malkin line and their road trip over the last 3 games. In those same games, the Sidney Crosby line has 1 goal for, 3 goals against at 5-on-5. That 1 goal, by the way, was... Never mind. It doesn't count like that. 1 goal for, 40% of the shot attempts, 37% of the expected goals, and 34% of the scoring chances. Are you worried about this performance, or do you think that it's just 3 games where they didn't have it and they're going to bounce back because it's these 3 guys?
It's hard to say. I think Crosby and Gensel will bounce back just fine. I think Rust might need a little change of scenery in the lineup somewhere. And I think this is because, do you remember old school Brian Rust? Remember that inconsistent 20-some, 30 games without a goal?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that, Brian Rust? I think I'm not saying that's what we're getting, but I'm saying that's starting to it's starting to peer its ugly head around the corner, which is not good considering Brian Rust turned into one of the most consistent players on this team. I mean, Gensel's still scoring, like I said, with the empty netters. They don't ask how, they ask how many, and it's still good that he is able to capitalize on those opportunities, considering we saw Brian Rust miss one.
Yeah.
And if he had that one on the stat sheet, you wouldn't look at his game log and go, oh, he hasn't scored a point in, I think it's 6 games? Something's either 5? That's not good. And Crosby's game log still picking up assists every now and again. Takes him a minute sometimes, but it's not what we wanted from this line. You wanted this line to, all 3 of them have a point pretty much every night at least, or something along those lines, something to average out like that. Not one of them going 5 games without a point, not shooting the puck, by the way. Brian Rust has 2 shots in the last 3 games and is a minus, what is that number? -4. There's a -4 in those 5 games. Sure, we don't take plus minus into account, but that's pretty severe, especially considering the -4 came in 1 game. In Buffalo, no less. Sidney Crosby, sure, he's getting assists, but you want to see a little bit more of the game take over Sidney Crosby, and you just want to see Jake Gensel scoring real goals more often. Like I said, at the end of the day, if he hits 50 at the end of the year, you're not going to remember those 2 empty netters in a row he had in November, but you still want him to be able to score the timely goals, score the goals that really count toward putting the team in positions to win, and not just empty netters. I mean, did a whole piece on it. He was on his 4-game goal streak, which also impressive. Let's just be honest. Like, that's good. 2 of them may have been empty netters, but at the same time, you look at his numbers. All right, so he's creeping into the top 10 of goal scoring in franchise history. Awesome. He's going to blow past a couple more names. I didn't realize he was in the top 10 in game-winning goals already, too. And, like, very close behind a bunch of other names. So he can be in the top 5 pretty soon. That's impressive. So we need to see more of that from him, more of the timely goal scorer, more of the I'm going to win you games goals, and Sidney Crosby to set those up. And as for Rust, something needs to kick into gear.
Yeah, Sidney Crosby has 2 assists in those last 3 games, so it's not like he's been held off the score sheet entirely, but it's the 200-foot game that's not looking good. And Jake Gensel is never really heralded as a defensive specialist, but he's not a hack back there. He knows what he's doing. He's positionally sound. He's smart and knows the game. And Brian Rust, like you said, you just need more from Brian Rust. Now, am I worried about this line's performance? Not yet.
Not yet.
But it certainly helps that the second line has been as good as it has, because if not, then you're going to ask that question a lot sooner of this line. So you just hope that the second line can continue out the way they have, and you hope that the first line can figure things out moving forward, because the Penguins, they have 1 game at home, and then it's another 3-game road trip. It's not going to get any easier as you take on Minnesota, you take on Winnipeg, and then you take on Toronto for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. So you're going to have a team that knows how to play you. You're going to have to break out, and for that, you need your stars to play like stars. So the Penguins will need those 3 going forward. We're going to take one last quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Penguins-Leafs rematch that will happen on Tuesday night, and we'll finish things off with our weekly Pens poll. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. If you've listened this far already, we have a nice message for you that I'm actually going to re-record and put at the beginning of the message and beginning of the episode. We do have a Teddy Bluger jersey giveaway. We are officially doing it. It will be announced tomorrow during the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Check out Inside the Penguins. We'll put up a small video about who's winning that. But make sure you're subscribed to Inside the Penguins on YouTube for a chance to win a signed Teddy Bluger jersey. Simple as that. Just hit subscribe and you're entered to win. One of many giveaways we hope to do for Inside the Penguins on YouTube, as well as Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast itself throughout the 2022-23 season. But Horwat, let's talk about the Penguins taking on the Leafs. Obviously, we already saw this matchup a couple days ago. The Penguins won round number 1 by a score of 4-2 on Friday night. We saw the Leafs and what they can do in the second period. That's what scares me. When you see the Leafs being that good of a team. Now, Casey DeSmith stood on his head. You love to see it, especially from your backup. But Matthews, Marner, Nylander all began to just skate around the Penguins and completely shut things down, making it look very bad for the Penguins in that game. But luckily, the Penguins shut things down in the third period. Casey DeSmith played well, and they get that empty net goal from Jake Guentzel to get the 4-2 win on the road. What do you want to see from the Penguins going into this matchup with the Leafs, this time at PPG Paints Arena?
There's more of that shutdown defense, more of the kind of like when Toronto was attacking with their extra attacker. The Penguins were just shutting him down. They weren't really attempting to get the empty net, if you will, but they were just suffocating. They weren't letting them get through into the zone. They weren't letting them make their plays. They weren't letting them get set up. You would need to see a little bit more of that throughout the game, not just toward the end. You're going to need that and for that first line to wake up the proper way, because it seems like other players around the lineup are waking up. We just had a long discussion about the second line completely just dominating and taking over. The first line needs to find its legs, and shutting down and just being a suffocating defense again for a team like this, that's the ideal path.
Yeah, for the Pittsburgh Penguins on Tuesday, what I want to see is more of what we saw at the end of the game last Wednesday. Crosby's line with a lead, 45-second to a 1-minute entire shift in the Capitals zone. At that point, they had the lead. So not necessarily taking shots, but making sure that Alex Ovechkin was wasting energy 200 feet away from your own net, especially with Casey DeSmith in. And in that situation, especially when you were down to 4 defensemen, potentially 3 with Jeff Petrie playing with a little bit of an injury. I loved what I saw at the end of the game against the Caps. I liked what I saw a lot from that game against the Leafs, and I liked what I saw a little bit against the Canadiens. So get back to what we saw on Wednesday afternoon, or Wednesday evening, I should say, against the Capitals. That's what I want to see on Tuesday. And now when we go to the prediction, I know that every once in a while, the Penguins just light up the Leafs. It happens, it seems like once a year. The Penguins just have their number. And more often than not, it seems like it happens on home ice. So I'm going to predict the Penguins get back to their winning ways again. I'm going to predict that the first line figures it out. I'm going to predict that the second line continues. And I'm going to predict the Penguins win this one by a score of 7-4.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with a victory. I don't know how big. I mean, you texted me. Apparently, I nailed the score of the last one. Way to go, me.
Yeah, the Leafs game. You nailed it, 4-2 Penguins.
Big shout out to that empty net goal from Jake Guentzel. So I'm gonna go with a 5-3 victory as well, just because I do see a big victory, a big fun game, a lot of scoring, both sides, just because both these teams can really fire the puck. I don't know who's in net for the Penguins, and I also don't know who's in net for the Leafs either. There's still a lot going on over there. But also, what are they coming off any back-to-backs by chance? Because I know when we played them the first time, both teams were in that back-to-back situation. They do play the night before. Oh, now it gets interesting. They're in Minnesota the night before. So
tonight.
That's tonight. I'm looking at the wrong. That's the next time we play them. I'm looking at. See, that's the other thing that happens whenever you play
3 times in 2 weeks.
Yeah. For what it's worth, though, next 2 weeks from now, the Leafs come in on second half of a back-to-back situation, although the Penguins do too, flying out of Philly. So ignore everything I just said. I'm just gonna hold on to a 5-3 win, and I shut up now. I need a nap.
We're gonna move over to the Pens poll. We'll try to expedite this because Horwat is getting a little delirious on us here at the end of this episode.
I had a long day yesterday.
We're gonna ask on our Pens poll, which player will break out of their slump first? Now, this is gonna be an interesting Pens poll because two players kind of already have a little bit. One player specifically has, but the results of our Penguins poll here: Chris Letang 48%, Danton Heinen 38%, Brock McGinn 10%, Jeff Petrie 4%. Now, if I told you two of those players had scored a goal and one's on a 3-game goal streak, wouldn't you think it would be the top two and not the bottom two?
Yeah, probably.
Well, that is not the case, as Brock McGinn, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute, Brock McGinn is currently on a 3-game goal streak. It seems like his drought is thoroughly over. Jeff Petrie scored a goal against the Montreal Canadiens. A little bit of a revenge spot for him. And Chris Letang continues to struggle. Danton Heinen and that entire third line continues to struggle. So 14% of you had a good eye out for what was about to happen last week. And Brock McGinn certainly had a great week. Jeff Petrie is still struggling a little bit to do what his job actually is, which is play defense.
Yes.
But he did get that goal against Montreal. He still does keep getting into the penalty box, which is an issue. But certainly better results from those two than what we saw from Danton Heinen and Chris Letang last week.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have picked Brock McGinn to be the one that pulls out of it. But here we are, 3 straight goals, 2 of them being game winners, by the way. Mm-hmm. Goals in 3 straight, 2 of them being game winners. And Jeff Petrie, man, he's just got his problems. He just needs to iron out. We can see that he's got the potential to be a very good second pairing defenseman here. He's got that potential. He's got the ability. I mean, he's putting up points. Shockingly, still 3 goals, 4 assists. He's still, accumulating. But man, he just has to stay out of the box. Mm-hmm. That's the big issue.
Mm-hmm. I want to close this show out by talking a little bit more about McGinn because 3-game goal streak, you mentioned it, 2-game winning goals, very impressive. It's the best stretch he has had since joining the Penguins before last season, beating out his 3 goals in 4 games last December. When we talk about Brock McGinn, and I wrote a piece about this in the middle of the summer, basically saying, there was something that I saw last year in Brock McGinn before the December COVID shutdown. And it was him starting to pick up the pace, starting to get on a roll, and then he just couldn't stay in the lineup. He had that long drought because of COVID. That slowed him down. Then he caught COVID in the middle of January. That stopped him for a couple weeks. Then he had to recover from that. Then he broke his wrist. Then he had to recover from that. So he wasn't able to consistently stay in the lineup once the Christmas shutdown happened last year. But he played very well beforehand. Now you're starting to see him pick up his game this last week. Do I think that's something that he'll be able to continue? Probably not at the pace that he is. Clearly, a goal per game is not something we expect from Brock McGinn. But being a little bit more dangerous, getting a little bit more shots on net, playing more in the offensive end of the ice. Now, I know that third line entirely didn't play perfect. I know Danton Heinen and Jeff Carter and the underlying numbers for that line aren't good. But Brock McGinn, in the spots that he needs to, are taking the timely shots and scoring the timely goals. This might be something where you see, 7 points in 15 games. I'll take that from Brock McGinn. If he can be effective on the penalty kill and score half a point a game, I'll take that from Brock McGinn. He's certainly playing better than Kasperi Kapanen, and having 4 goals in the first 15 games, which is a pace for what? 20 goals, 18, 17 goals. I know 3 goals in 3 games is going to help. If he's a guy that can score 15 goals in a season for the Penguins and play effectively on the penalty kill, I have no issue with Brock McGinn. Now, he hasn't been that player for most of his stint in Pittsburgh, but if he can be the guy that he has been at the beginning of last season and that he has been in the last 3 games, doesn't necessarily need the goals, but can be effective and can do the timely things correctly, then I'm fine with Brock McGinn being a third-line player on this team.
Yeah, no, me too. As long as that production is there, and like I said, it doesn't have to be astronomical, doesn't have to be, game breaking, but just little minor production here and there, and then obviously that penalty kill performance helping that really regain its shape, which it seems like it's starting to do. Then yeah, perfectly okay. You never want to bring money into the conversation, but sometimes you have to. And 275 at times when he's not playing well, 275 looks like an anchor. He's playing well. We're gonna look at 275 like jump change. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the thing with the cash is paying Brock McGinn 275 in a vacuum is not awful. Even when he's not on his game, it's not great, but it's not awful in a vacuum. But when you get outside that vacuum, when you empty the bag there and you see a $3.2 million Kasperi Kapanen, and you see however much money Jeff Carter is making, and they're all not producing, that's when you look at each of those players and say, you're all getting overpaid because none of you are producing, because we have so many players in that same bubble. It was the problem they had last year. Why do we have so many defensemen being paid over $4 million, and we have one like the 26th ranked defense in the National Hockey League? Now you look at the bottom six and you say, we have a lot of guys that are getting paid between $2 and $4 million, and none of them are producing. Like Danton Heinen came back on a $1 million deal. He's starting to produce like a $1 million player.
Yep. Hey, knocked that one out of the park, apparently.
So it's a thing where if Brock McGinn, like I said, I don't need a goal a game from Brock McGinn, but the way that he has played, those timely goals, if he can give you 1 or 2 or 3 of those within a month, that's what you need to see. And shoot, we said 2 game-winning goals. He should have had 3 game-winning goals. He scored the goal to put the Penguins up 4-3. A very, you can say what you want about the first 2. They were kind of fluky. Third one was a good shot on a 2-on-1. Good finish. You love to see it. So, we are obviously hard on players when they're bad. We got to give players their flowers when they're good. And Brock McGinn was good last week.
Oh, absolutely. He was very good last week. He was, again, much better than we would have expected. I wouldn't have chosen him to be the player that breaks out of the slump, to break out of his little droughts, but here we are.
Yep.
And I'm happy with any of them breaking out of the drought. I'm glad it was him. I would have been glad if it was anyone else. Now it is everyone else's turn.
Yeah, if I got to ask for somebody else, I got to ask for Chris Letang to.
Yes.
6 more years. We always said that the drop-off when it happened could be severe. Let's hope that that's not what we're watching, because it's going to be a long 6 years.
We fought hard for him to re-sign this year, and all of a sudden we're looking at Malkin like, oh, so you were the one to keep around. Uh-oh, this isn't good.
Well, you don't want to overreact to a couple games, but that's what we do here. We will overreact. Brock McGinn is God. Sidney Crosby sucks. That's what we're overreacting with. But we'll see how it goes this week. We will be back on Thursday with a new episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you check out a bonus episode coming out tomorrow where we talk about the reverse retro jerseys. We break down our favorite, our least favorite. I watched the Seattle Kraken on Sunday, and even on the ice, I'm like, still off. Off.
I think we don't like it because it's a reverse retro. If they would have just said these are our new thirds, I think would have been like, they're not great, but at least they're not supposed to be something else.
Those are semantics. To me, I just don't like the jersey. I don't like the kit, man. That's all it is. So we have that coming out tomorrow. We will have an episode of Penguins Lunch on Wednesday. I will be joined by Josh Yohe of The Athletic, so make sure you check that out. And then a new episode on Thursday of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Full 45 to 50-minute episode. We got a lot of content coming for you this week, guys. And then, of course, next week with Thanksgiving, we're going to give you a little bit less content. But that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back all the time this week.